My daughter-in-law had the nerve to look me in the eye and say, "This dinner is for immediate family only." I had just driven 40 minutes in the rain. I was holding a gift bag. And somewhere in the back of that restaurant, my son was pretending he didn't know I was standing at the hostess stand. That was the moment everything shifted for me. Not the screaming kind of shift. The quiet kind. The kind where something inside you goes very still and you realize you have been living in a story you told yourself and none of it was true. Let me back up. My name is Harriet. I'm 63 years old. I live outside of Columbus, Ohio, in the same house I've owned for 31 years. I raised my son, Owen, mostly by myself after his father left when Owen was 9. I worked as a dental office manager for 26 years. I clipped coupons, drove a used car, took one vacation in 12 years, and put every spare dollar I had into making sure Owen had what he needed. Not what he wanted, what he needed. Though, looking back now, I'm not sure I always knew the difference. Owen was a good kid, smart, quiet. He made me proud in the ways mothers keep score of: honor roll, never in trouble, got into a state university on partial scholarship. I covered the rest, around $19,000 over 4 years, between tuition gaps, books, an apartment his junior year when the dorms got too loud for him to study, and a used Civic I bought him so he could get to his internship. I didn't think of it as a sacrifice at the time. I thought of it as just being his mother. He graduated, got a job in marketing, and 2 years later brought home a woman named Felicia. Felicia was beautiful in the way that makes you nervous. Perfect posture, perfect nails, the kind of person who uses the word curated in casual conversation. She was polite to me at first, the way you're polite to someone you know you'll have to deal with, but haven't yet decided how to handle. She laughed at the right moments, asked about my garden, complimented my pot roast. I told myself I liked her. I wanted to like her. They got engaged 8 months after they started dating. Owen called me on a Tuesday night and said, "Mom, I'm going to propose this weekend. I wanted you to know first." That part warmed me. That part felt like my son. What came after did not. The wedding was planned for the following October, 14 months away. Felicia had ideas, big ones. Her parents were contributing a certain amount, and Owen asked if I could help cover the rehearsal dinner, which is traditionally the groom's family's responsibility. Of course, I said yes. I'd been saving. I had a little over $8,000 set aside for exactly this kind of moment. The rehearsal dinner ended up costing $11,200. The venue was Felicia's choice. The caterer was Felicia's choice. The floral arrangements, yes, for a rehearsal dinner, were Felicia's choice. I smiled through all of it, wrote the checks, and told myself this was a one-time thing. That was 6 years ago. What I didn't understand then, what I understand completely now, is that when you establish yourself as someone who will cover the gap has a way of growing. The year after the wedding, Owen's car needed a new transmission. $4,000. He didn't ask exactly. It was more that he mentioned it was going to be a problem, and I offered, and he accepted without much hesitation. Then Felicia decided she wanted to leave her job and start a home staging business. Could I help with startup costs? Just a loan, he said, which I never saw repaid, around $6,000. Then their apartment lease was up and they wanted to buy a house and they were a little short on the down payment and I had some equity in mind, so I took out a home equity line of credit and gave them $15,000. $15,000. They bought a 4-bedroom house in a suburb I could not afford to live in. I want to be honest here because I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I've talked to my friend Helen about it more times than she probably wanted to hear. I was not purely generous. Part of what I was doing, I can see it now, was buying proximity. I was paying to stay close to my son because every time I didn't give what was asked of me, he got a little distant. Not cruel, just absent. He'd forget to call, forget to text back, forget I existed basically, until he needed something again. I told myself it was just how young couples were. Busy, building their lives. I told myself Felicia didn't dislike me, she was just private. I told myself the invitations I didn't receive, the birthday dinners at nice restaurants, the New Year's Eve parties, the housewarming where I found out from someone else that it had happened, were oversights. Scheduling conflicts. She had a big family. I understood. I told myself a lot of things for a long time. About 2 years into their marriage, I started keeping a notebook. I don't know exactly what made me start it. Maybe it was finding out about the housewarming party the way I did. Maybe it was calling Owen on my birthday and getting voicemail. Then seeing photos on his social media that evening of the two of them at a rooftop bar with her family. Maybe it was smaller than that, the way Felicia never quite met my eyes when we were in the same room. The way Owen always seemed to be looking at her when I was talking, gauging her reaction before he gave me his. Whatever it was, I started writing things down. Dates, amounts, events I wasn't included in. I used a yellow legal pad and kept it in the drawer next to my bed. I am not a dramatic woman. I was not building a case, at least not consciously. I just wanted to stop feeling crazy. I wanted something real to look at when my brain tried to smooth it over and say, "It's not that bad, Harriet. You're imagining things." I was not imagining things. Over those 6 years, I calculated, not including the rehearsal dinner, I had given or loaned Owen and Felicia just under $44,000. I had also been excluded, in one form or another, from at least 11 family gatherings I knew about. I had been told, by Owen, not unkindly but clearly coached, that Felicia's family did holidays together and it was a whole thing, and maybe I could come by for dessert afterward. Dessert. After Thanksgiving. Dessert. I went. Because I wanted to see my son. I kept going. Because I kept thinking it would change. There's a woman in my water or box class named Paulette. She's been through a difficult divorce and she has a way of cutting through things quickly. One afternoon in the locker room after class, I told her a condensed version of all of this. And she put her hand on my arm and said, "Harriet, honey, you're funding a life that doesn't include you." I went home and sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. She was right. I just hadn't let myself say it out loud yet. Owen called me in late September to let me know they were having an anniversary dinner at a restaurant called the Birchwood, a private room they'd reserved for their 6th wedding anniversary. He mentioned it the way you mention something when you want to seem like you're sharing information but you're not actually inviting anyone. He said it was just going to be close friends and her family. I didn't push, but 2 days before the dinner, his younger cousin Becca texted me to ask if I was going. Said she thought it was nice that Owen was doing something special. I said I'd check with him. I texted Owen. He said he'd call me. He didn't call me. The night of the dinner, I made a decision that I now understand was partly stupid and partly necessary. I drove to the Birchwood. I want to say I went because I was tired of being an afterthought, tired of giving and watching myself disappear. And that's true. But honestly, I also went because some part of me still believed Owen would see me standing there and something would change on his face, and he'd say, "Mom, of course, come in." I was 61 years old and still hoping my son would choose me. I walked in carrying a small gift, a framed photo from their wedding that I'd had restored and matted. The hostess at the front was very young and very earnest, and looked immediately uncomfortable when I gave Owen's name. She made a call. A few minutes later, Felicia came out. Not Owen. Felicia. She was wearing a deep green dress and her hair was up, and she looked stunning and furious in the way that people are when they're furious, but have decided to stay controlled. She looked at the gift bag in my hand. She looked at me. "This is a private dinner," she said, "for our guests. I'm Owen's mother," I said. I don't know why I said it. She knew who I was. "I know who you are," she said. "This dinner is for immediate family." something passed through me then that was very cold and very clear. I looked at her. I said, "I understand," and I turned around, walked back to the restaurant, and got into my car in the rain. I sat there for probably 4 minutes. I did not cry. I was past the crying part, I think. Though I didn't know that yet. I texted Owen I came to the dinner. I was turned away at the door. "I hope you enjoy your evening." He didn't respond for 3 hours. When he did, he wrote, "Mom, I'm sorry. We'll talk soon. We'll talk soon. We'll talk soon." I drove home, made myself a cup of tea, got out my yellow legal pad, and under everything else I'd written, I added the date, the restaurant, and 4 words, "Turned away. Felicia. Door." Then I opened my laptop. Now, here is something about me that I think Felicia never accounted for. I spent 26 years as an office manager. I can organize anything. I understand contracts. I understand accounts. I understand exactly how money moves and what happens when it stops. The home equity line of credit I'd taken out to help with their down payment. I'd been paying down the balance, but there was still a portion outstanding that I'd been allowing to sit because interest rates were manageable and I hadn't needed the money for anything else. What most people don't realize is that a home equity line of credit is controlled by the borrower, by me, and the automatic transfer I'd set up that went toward Owen's monthly car payment, the one for the replacement vehicle they'd bought 18 months ago when Felicia didn't like the one they had, was also controlled by me. The recurring Venmo payment I sent them each month, which had started as help with the baby when they had my granddaughter Lily 3 years ago, also controlled by me. I did not do anything that night. I'm telling you that because I want you to understand I didn't act out of anger. I slept on it. I slept on it for 3 days, actually. I kept going to work, kept going to water aerobics, kept talking to Paulette, who sat across from me at her kitchen table and said, "What are you waiting for?" On the 4th day, I made a list of every financial support I was providing. Then I canceled it. Quietly, systematically, the way I'd once managed 16 dental patient accounts at the same time. The auto transfer for the car payment canceled. The monthly Venmo stopped. The home equity line of credit, which they'd assumed was basically a permanent feature of their financial landscape, I called the bank and began the process of calling in the balance. I also called my attorney, a woman I've used for years named Helen's friend, actually, and asked her to look at my will, which hadn't been updated in some time, and my beneficiary designations on my retirement accounts. I didn't call Owen. I didn't send a long letter. I didn't explain myself. I waited. It took 9 days. On a Thursday evening in October, my phone started ringing. Owen first, twice, then a 3rd time. Then Felicia, which surprised me because Felicia had not called me voluntarily in the 6 years she'd been married to my son. Then Owen again. Then an unknown number that I'm fairly certain was Felicia calling from her mother's phone when I didn't pick up. By the end of that evening, I had 29 missed calls. By the following afternoon, 41. I did not answer any of them. I texted Owen once, "When you're ready to have a real conversation, let me know. I love you." He came to my house on a Saturday morning. He stood on my porch looking like he hadn't slept in days, which I suspected was true, and when I opened the door, he said, "Mom, what did you do?" I let him in. I made coffee. I put my yellow legal pad on the kitchen table between us. He looked at it. It was 31 pages. I said, "That's what I did, Owen, for 6 years. I kept a record so I wouldn't feel crazy because I knew if I didn't write it down, I'd tell myself I was overreacting." I tapped the first page. $11,000 for a rehearsal dinner I co-planned by approving a menu I'd never seen before the bill arrived. The transmission. The business loan I apparently donated. The $15,000 for the house. I slid the pad across to him. "I want you to read it. Not right now, if you don't want to. But I want you to understand that when you say, 'Mom, what did you do?' I did the same thing you've been doing." I kept track. He was quiet for a long time. He drank his coffee. He didn't read the legal pad, but he didn't push it away either. Finally, he said, It's not as simple as you're making it. I know, I said. It never is. I looked at my son, this person I had given my best years to, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Sadness without bitterness. Just sadness. Clean sadness, if that makes any sense. Owen, I love you. I will always love you. But I'm 63 years old, and I have spent the last 6 years making myself smaller so that you could stay comfortable, and I'm done. Not done with you. Done making myself smaller. He didn't say much after that. He took the legal pad with him when he left, which surprised me. He said he needed to think. I said that was fine. That was 4 months ago. We're talking now. It is not easy. Felicia and I have not spoken one-on-one. I don't know if we ever will. But Owen and I have had several phone calls that felt like real conversations, not performances. He told me, haltingly, that he had known I was coming to the dinner and had told Felicia, and Felicia had made it clear that if he overruled her, there would be consequences that I could infer the shape of. He said he was ashamed of himself. I believed him. I still see my granddaughter Lily. That was non-negotiable. I made that clear before anything else. Whatever is happening between the adults in this family, Lily gets her grandmother. Owen agreed. Felicia did not protest, maybe because she understood that a grandmother who has an attorney and 31 pages of documentation is not someone to push further. I am rebuilding things. Not dramatically. Not in a way that requires anyone to stand up and applaud. I put money back in my retirement account that I'd been underfunding for years. I replanted the garden section I'd let go because I was too tired and too preoccupied to care for it. I started saying yes to things I'd been declining. Dinners with Helen and Paulette, a weekend trip to see my sister in Virginia that I'd put off 3 years running. My sister, when I told her everything, said, "Harriet, you kept a 31-page legal pad. You're the most organized, heartbroken person I've ever known." And we both laughed, which felt like the first real laugh I'd had in a long time. I don't know where Owen and I end up. I hope we find our way back to something genuine. I hope Lily grows up knowing her grandmother is a woman who loved fiercely and eventually, finally, loved herself enough to stop shrinking. I used to think that writing down all the ways you've been overlooked made you petty, made you someone who keeps score. I've changed my mind. I think sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to see things clearly. Not to punish anyone, not to win, but just to stop pretending the fog is weather when you're the one creating it. I made a pot of soup last Sunday. Split pea, Owen's favorite when he was small. I didn't bring it to him. I ate it myself. Standing at my kitchen window, watching the birds at the feeder, I finally remembered to refill. It was the best soup I'd made in years. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that October night. Not in any grand philosophical way, just the simple, unavoidable truth that what we allow, we teach. Every time I transferred money without a conversation, every time I showed up for dessert after Thanksgiving like a guest at my own son's table, every time I swallowed the hurt and told myself it wasn't that bad, I was teaching Owen that this was acceptable, that I was acceptable as an afterthought. I wasn't a victim of circumstance. I was a participant in it, and that's the hardest thing I've had to sit with. What I know now, at 63, that I wish I'd understood at 55, is that love without limits isn't love. It's anxiety wearing love's clothing. I wasn't giving to Owen because I was generous. I was giving because I was afraid. Afraid that if I stopped, he'd disappear entirely. And the cruelest irony is that my giving, my endless accommodating, didn't keep him close. It kept Felicia comfortable and it kept Owen from ever having to choose. I made it too easy for him to not choose me. There's a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with school. It's the intelligence of paying attention to patterns, to what's actually happening versus what you're telling yourself is happening. That yellow legal pad I kept for 6 years wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. It was me trying to stay honest with myself when everything around me was pushing me to look away. I think that's what wisdom actually looks like in ordinary life. Not grand pronouncements. Just a woman at her kitchen table writing things down so she doesn't gaslight herself. And then there's the matter of nerve, of deciding at an age when a lot of people think the story is mostly written that you are allowed to rewrite your part in it. Walking out of the birchwood that night without screaming, without begging Owen to come to the door, without making a scene, that took more out of me than people might imagine. And then going home, sleeping on it for 3 days, and methodically, calmly canceling every payment, that took a different kind of strength entirely. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that just does what needs doing and then makes a cup of tea. Paulette asked me once if I regretted keeping the legal pad. I told her no. I told her the pad was the first honest thing I'd done for myself in years. Lily is 3 years old and she calls me Grandma Hattie, and she doesn't know any of this, and she won't, not for a long time, maybe not ever. What she will know is a grandmother who shows up present, who has a full life of her own, who isn't hollowed out from years of shrinking. That's what I can give her now. Not money. Presence. What you put into the world comes back, not as punishment, not as reward, but as consequence. Owen is learning what it costs to let someone love you completely and then treat that love as a budget line item. I hope he figures it out. I believe he's trying. And I am done waiting for permission to take up the space I was always allowed to take. The soup was good. I made it again last week.